My wife and I had been together for 20 years before we ended our marriage. We met when we were both in high school. I had just moved into the area and I didn't know anybody in town. She was always very friendly to me, and I immediately took a liking to her. She was sweet, kind, and most importantly, she had the same relationship with God as me. I'd always dreamed of becoming a pastor, so after college we weighed the options. We eventually decided it wasn't feasible at the time, so we got jobs. After about 5 years, I reached a certain point where I was deeply unhappy with my work and I needed change. My wife stood by me while I got an associate's degree in theology. After that, I threw myself into studying everything there was to know about Christianity, and I did everything I needed to become a pastor. We opened our own church, and after a while our congregation grew. I couldn't have done any of it without the help of my wife. She was my rock through all of it, and I still have so much love for her because of that. Religion has always been important to both of us, and I know a lot of people assume that closed-door activities can be a little bit bland. I will comment briefly on that. It wasn't for us. We were a married couple, and nothing we did behind closed doors that we were both fully consenting to was sinful in any way. That being said, the only thing that had ever been brought up that I didn't think was right was bringing another person into the bedroom. The problem started for us when a new family moved into town. We met them when they stopped by the church to ask about baptizing their son. My wife and I wanted to make sure they were happy in the community, so we gave them all the information about the church and told them to come to the following Sunday sermon. We were happy to see them there, and we introduced them to the rest of the people in our town. At the end of it, we invited them over for dinner so we could get to know them a little bit better. They came over later that night and we had a great time with them. They kept coming back on Sundays to see us. I was happy that we had some new members for the church, and I was also happy to see that they were integrating with the community well through it. My wife ran a weekly community service group that didn't have very many volunteers. She would have some around major holidays like Christmas or Easter, but throughout the rest of the year it was normally just her and maybe 1 or 2 other people. One day my wife came home from her community service and happily told me that the new couple had joined the group. I was excited by the news. Over the following months, we spent more and more time with them and they became close friends of ours. We saw them regularly for dinners and we even hung out with them outside of the church for double dates and things like that. My wife was the only woman that I had ever been with, and as far as I was aware she had never broken the bonds of our marriage. I had no idea what to look out for as far as cheating went. I know now that she was acting strangely for a while, but at the time nothing stood up to me. One of the biggest indicators that I missed was how she started volunteering on extra days during the week. The entire time we were in the church, she would always volunteer on Thursdays. Suddenly she was volunteering on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and the occasional Saturday. I was always very busy maintaining the church and planning sermons, so I wasn't always able to help her with the service. I first noticed that something was off when she was making her announcements on Sunday and mentioned her Thursday community service group. I had been under the assumption that the Tuesday and Saturday groups were the same thing. I didn't understand why she didn't mention the extra days, especially if that might open up the door for other members to volunteer. When I approached the altar to give my sermon, I added an addendum to what she said, telling them about the additional days. When the sermon was over, she seemed to be irritated with me. I asked her about what was wrong and she told me that I undermined her by correcting her in front of everybody and embarrassed her. On top of that, she told me that they weren't doing the Tuesday and Saturday volunteer days that week. I apologized and told her that I never meant to embarrass her. However, I went to my office and I saw that on our shared calendar she had Tuesday marked off for volunteering. Her story wasn't quite adding up to me. I started to think that there was something off, though I didn't know what exactly it could have been. Infidelity never crossed my mind. Part of me assumed she had some kind of guilty pleasure that she was participating in that she didn't want me to know about. I didn't like that she was keeping something a secret from me, but we had been married for so long and we knew everything about each other that I felt she might have been entitled to have something to herself. I found out the truth of the matter when I decided to join her in her community service group. It was the week before Easter Sunday, so I already knew my sermon like the back of my hand. She had that Tuesday blocked off on her calendar for volunteering, so I decided that I would join her in the spare time that I had. When I went to join her in the recreation room of the church, nobody was there. I texted her and asked her about where they were because I planned on joining them, but I never got a response. That was unlike her, so I was immediately worried about her. I thought that she might have gone home, so I made my way there and saw that her car was in the driveway. Instantly, I was relieved. I figured that nobody showed up to volunteer with her, so she must have canceled it. I walked inside and heard some very strange noises coming from the basement. We had a partially finished basement with one room that was being remodeled into a guest bedroom for my mother to come and live with us. With the thudding noises, I thought that she might have been down there assembling some furniture or doing some work now that she was free. I put my things down and went downstairs to help her. Instead of finding her in the middle of remodeling the basement, I saw her having relations with the new couple, both of them. I was in complete shock. It was the last thing I ever expected to see my wife in the middle of. They saw me and immediately stopped what they were doing. My wife approached me trying to explain what was happening, but I was so shaken by everything that I could hardly hear what she was saying. I walked upstairs and into my bedroom, locking the door behind me. It was a lot to process. I thought she was the love of my life. I trusted her more than anybody else in the world, and I gave everything I had to her. In turn, she broke the vow of our marriage. She was banging on the door and trying to get in because she thought I was hurting myself when I was really just sitting on the bed. Eventually, she had the man from the couple break down the door. I was practically catatonic. I never got angry. I've always been very calm and collected, but seeing them all there staring at me like they were concerned about me filled me with such a fury that I was shaking. I yelled at all three of them, and I told them that they needed to leave. After I collected myself, I reached out to a divorce attorney and I explained that I saw my wife cheating on me. Unfortunately, they recognized my name and they knew my wife. I wanted to keep everything a secret, but I didn't think it was going to be possible. My wife begged me to forgive her and give her a second chance, telling me that it was the godly thing to do. I didn't have it in me to do that. I told her that we were over and that I was going to be divorcing her so she should get an attorney herself. Easter Sunday was very difficult because we wanted to be perceived as normal as possible because of what the holiday meant to everyone in attendance. It was difficult to put a smile on my face and be around her. The following Sunday, my wife did not give the opening announcements as she always did after the music. I could see that there were some confused faces in the congregation. I didn't want to share the news with them, but I wanted them to hear it from me rather than from everybody else in town. I explained that my wife and I were getting divorced due to infidelity. The rest of the sermon was dedicated to my wife and the couple that she was having an affair with. It was about infidelity and how sinful it was to break a sacred marriage vow. In hindsight, it might have been a little bit bitter, but it was where my heart was at the time. I divorced my wife. The attorney that I worked with was exceptional and they made sure I was well taken care of. I didn't make a lot of money as a pastor, so they made sure I did not have to pay anything in spousal support to my wife. I was able to keep the house and I moved my mother in a few weeks after the divorce was finalized. My wife is almost treated like a pariah in town. I have very conflicting emotions about this because she hurt me and a part of me thinks that she deserves this, but another part doesn't think that anybody should harbor hate in their hearts. The couple that she was having an affair with has been outcast from most of the town after what they did. Rumors spread and I don't think they were able to clear anything up. Now I am focusing on my church and rebuilding my life without my wife present. It's actually very strange how many of the women in the congregation have been reaching out to me and asking me if there was anything they could do for me. Some of them are single women, divorced, widows, etc. I can tell that they're coming on to me in some ways, but I don't know if I'm ready to be in another relationship yet. OP, you sound like a genuinely kind and caring person, and you definitely didn't deserve to have this happen to you. Nobody does. It's such a shame that she would throw away a 20-year-long relationship for whatever it is that was going on with that couple. I understand how you might have conflicting emotions about how the rest of the town is treating your wife. I can't even imagine how complex that must be, balancing those emotions and trying to maintain a certain demeanor for the rest of your church course. Moving on is going to be very difficult after everything you went through, but I hope that eventually you are open to the possibility of finding love with another woman. Especially if some of those women are people you already know and trust and share the same beliefs as you. Now let's get into our second story for today. My girlfriend and I have been dating for about 18 months. It's not the longest relationship I know, but it was very toxic. She and I met at a nightclub in New York on New Year's Eve. She was by far the hottest girl in the room, and from what I could tell, she was there without a date. I saw a bunch of men going up to her and shooting their shots, and I figured I didn't have anything to lose by trying myself. I went up to her and made a couple of jokes that she was very receptive to. I ended up buying her a drink and we shared our first kiss at midnight. The first few months of our relationship were incredibly passionate. There was something about her that I found almost intoxicating. She was like a bit of a drug to me, and I couldn't spend enough time with her. After our honeymoon phase was over, she started getting very cold with me. It seemed like she was trying to pull away from the relationship, but I really didn't want that to happen. I invited her over for dinner one night and I opened up the floor to talk to her. I told her about how much I liked her and how I didn't know what was wrong with the relationship, but I wanted to work on it. She was honest and vulnerable with me, which I really appreciated. She told me that at certain points in relationships, she just got really nervous and she would pull away from them before she put her heart up there to get hurt. I assured her that she was my dream girl and I had absolutely no intention of fumbling her. After that conversation, things started looking up for us again. Over the next 6 months, we repeated that pattern 3 or 4 times. It was pretty exhausting, but we worked through it every time. At the time, I looked at that rocky relationship and thought that we only made it through those tough times because we had such a strong bond. I know now that it was entirely unhealthy and we should have just ended things after the first time. In the month leading up to our breakup, we had another low point. I was very exhausted with how everything was going. I have never been with somebody who was so hot and cold all the time, and I didn't know how much longer I was going to be able to handle it. It felt like every time I started to distance myself from the relationship, she would step in and do everything in her power to keep me there. For context, my girlfriend was an aspiring influencer. If for some reason you don't know what that means, it means that she was pretty much unemployed, but she had a couple of brand deals that helped her pay her rent. Whenever we would go out, I would foot the bill for dinner or concert tickets and things like that. I was also raised in a way that the man always pays for the dates, but that's a whole other thing. We were having a really low point in a relationship and she was making it clear to me that she wanted us to move in together. I was very confused about why she wanted to move in together if we were on the verge of breaking up. She told me that she thought if we lived together, it might make it easier for us to work through some of the issues we had. That made absolutely no sense to me, so I told her that I didn't want to move in with her until I knew we had a better foundation than we did. She was upset by that and she stormed away from me, and I hadn't spoken to her for about 4 days. It was reaching a point where I thought that she was just ghosting me. It sucked to think about it, but there was a part of me that was happy that it was over. She finally reached back up to me and told me that she wanted to get together to talk. I was fully preparing myself for a breakup when she came over to my apartment. Instead, she was honest with me and she told me that she wasn't able to pay for her rent because of an increase the landlord enacted. She didn't want to have to move back home with her parents, so she wanted to live with me. I was apprehensive about it at first. I didn't want her to be living with me just because she thought I was going to pay her bills. I explained that to her and we came to an agreement that she would just crash with me until she was on her feet. There was no legal binding and there was the option to kick her out should something happen with us and we break up. I was really glad that I decided not to officially move in with her. Just a few weeks after that happened, things really hit the fan with us. She had been working on her Instagram and TikTok following very hard. The more followers she had, the more brand deals she got, the more money she earned. She was following a lot of people and messaging a lot of other people with large follower bases and creating content almost non-stop. It was working for her too. She was getting a decent amount of followers and she was really getting up there. She had a couple of other brand offerings coming through and she was excited about all the prospects. One day, I took a half day from work because of a conference I needed to attend very early the following day. I was home just chilling on the couch playing some games when she walked in the door. She was wearing a men's t-shirt that I knew for a fact wasn't mine and I had never seen her wearing it before. I asked her about it and she told me that it was just an old shirt that she had. Something about it didn't check out to me. Of course, I didn't know her entire wardrobe, but she wasn't the type of person to walk around in an old oversized t-shirt with a couple of holes in the bottom of it. If she told me she borrowed a friend's t-shirt, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but I knew she was lying about it being her t-shirt. I didn't use social media a lot. I thought it was exhausting and most of the people who were using it all the time were very rapid, my girlfriend included. But after I saw that, I decided that I should take a look at it to see what was going on. Eventually, through her tagged photos on Instagram, I saw that she was with another man who was wearing the t-shirt she walked in with. Why would she walk into my apartment wearing the same t-shirt that another man was wearing the day before? I had my suspicions about her sleeping with someone else. I looked at the other guy's social media and saw that he had a lot of followers, not in the millions or anything but a decent amount. He was on a dating show and that's how he got semi-famous. I put two and two together and I was already under the assumption that they were having an affair. I just needed some kind of confirmation that that was the case. I figured if the evidence was anywhere, it was in her Instagram messages. She got in the shower and right away I looked through her laptop to see what I could find. Of course, she had her Instagram already logged in so I didn't have to do anything. I found her messages with the guy from the dating show and I thought they were very flirty. She messaged him first and said something about how she wanted to hang out with him if they were ever in New York. He responded to the message and they were very sexual with each other leading up to it. Whenever she would post a picture of herself, he would reply to it and send heart eye emojis and things like that. Their most recent messages had them meeting up for drinks at his hotel bar. He'd flown into the city for a photo shoot and he wanted to meet her. The fact that it was at his hotel bar told me all that I needed to know. There wasn't a doubt in my mind that they had sex with each other. I took a couple of screen grabs of the messages and I sent them to myself as quickly as I could while she was still in the shower. I made sure there were dates included and pictures to prove things. From the look of it, it seemed like the guy had somewhat of a relationship with someone I figured was a fellow cast member. Now I was aware that it could have been a publicity thing. I don't watch reality television, but if they wound up together, I'm sure a lot of fans of the show would probably love seeing them together after the fact. My girlfriend got out of the shower to find me in my bedroom packing up her belongings. She asked me about what I was doing and I told her that I knew about everything and I wanted her to get out of my apartment. I wasn't going to have a cheater crashing with me. She tried to yell at me for invading her privacy, but I didn't care. She was a liar and that was all that mattered. When she realized I wasn't going to budge, she packed up the rest of her belongings and got out. Her only other friend in the area was engaged and from what I understand, she didn't want her staying at her apartment because she lived there with her fiancé. I couldn't blame her for being nervous about that. I kicked my girlfriend out, but I was thinking about everything for a couple of days, figuring out things that I could do. I decided that I wanted to call her out on social media. She was using me and she lied to me and then cheated on me with someone who could help her get a leg up in the industry. I created a post on Instagram and I put it on my story. I reached out to the woman from the dating show who seemed to be in a relationship with the other guy and sent her everything. I commented on their videos and posts, trying to gain traction for it. Eventually, it took off and the rumors started spreading. People were on my girlfriend's Instagram account calling her a homewrecker alongside a myriad of other names a lot worse than that. I felt kind of bad that she was getting verbally attacked, but it wasn't really my problem. When my girlfriend found out that I was the one who posted that video, she was very upset with me. She told me that she didn't think I would ever do something like that to her, and she said she never wanted to talk to me again, as if that was her decision to begin with. The couple from the dating show both broke up and the woman actually went on a couple of podcasts and talked about everything. I didn't listen to them, but I had some friends share the information with me. People on the internet really hated the guy after everything because apparently he was already kind of a jerk on the show. Now I'm about a year and a half removed from that situation and I'm ready to move on from it. I'm a little more wary about people and relationships I'm going into now. I can't help but think that she wasn't with you for the right reasons. Your relationship seems very fake to me, at least from her end. It does seem like she liked you because you were taking her on dates and she thought you could provide for her, so she was willing to be with you because of that. I'm not surprised that she was reaching out to people with a lot of followers to try and hook up with them. She was no doubt doing that for the clout, and in some ways it worked, but maybe not in the way that she hoped. I'm sure in-brand deals that she had are going to be a little more conscious of her actions before renewing those deals. I think you did the right thing in sharing the story, especially since the person she cheated with was a public figure. That definitely helps to expose her more than you could have otherwise. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. My wife and I have been together for 15 years, and they were some of the best years of my life. When I met her, we were both in our late 20s and very focused on our careers. It was one of the most important things in our lives at the time, and I appreciated how ambitious she was. We started dating, and we both knew that no matter what, our personal success came first. A lot of people think that might not sound healthy, but we were both very independent, and we helped each other so much along the way. My wife had a bit of a health scare, which I won't go into details about due to privacy, but after that, she wanted to slow down and appreciate life over work. She told me that she wanted a child, and I thought it was a good idea as well. When she got pregnant, she quit her job, and I was left being the sole provider for our growing family. I made good money, but being the only provider put a lot more stress on me and my work than what had previously been there. Over the course of 15 years, we had 3 children and created a wonderful life together. Throughout all of these years, there was one small hitch in our relationship: her best friend. They had been friends since they were in grade school. He was my wife's oldest friend, they knew each other better than anyone else on earth, and they cared deeply for each other. It was difficult for me to understand their friendship, because I always thought that he had more than platonic feelings for my wife. I just got a sense from him that he had always been waiting for her to see that he was standing right in front of her. He had been single for the majority of our marriage. He spent years as a playboy with relationships, never lasting more than 6 months. My wife was always trying to set him up with her friends, but he never seemed to want to settle down. Then one day, he meets a month when he proposed to her. My wife was completely shocked by the news. She was happy, but she was surprised. She kept questioning him about whether or not he knew for sure she was the one for him. Honestly, at one point I felt like his love life had taken up a significant part of my wife and I's conversations. So I mentioned not wanting to talk about it anymore. My wife was annoyed with me for saying that because he was her best friend and she wanted to talk about it. I explained that it made me uncomfortable that she was taking up such a big part of his life in regard to his romantic relationships. She thought I was kind of crazy for thinking that way. We argued about their relationship and I ended up sleeping on the couch that night. The following day, she told me that I had nothing to worry about with their relationship. He was her oldest friend, and nothing more than that. I accepted what she said and moved on. She never gave me any reason to believe anything else, and I had let my own insecurities get the best of me. She hadn't known the fiancé very well, so she stepped in to help with some of the wedding planning. It was something she had worked with before she quit her job, so she knew a lot of ins and outs of the industry. At least once a week when she would come home after helping the fiancé, she would complain about how much she didn't like her. She was constantly telling me about how she thought their relationship wasn't going to last and she wanted to try and talk to her friend about it because she didn't think they were a good fit. In hindsight, she was very jealous. I think she realized her friend was going to be less interested in her, so she didn't like the fiancé. As the date for the wedding drew near, she spent more time with her friend and fiancé helping them prep for it. I saw her less and less and I was getting frustrated. Not to sound like some chauvinist, but I worked between 8 to 10 hours a day and a lot of times I had to take work home with me to finish up as well. While she was planning the wedding, I was coming home from work and cooking dinner, then cleaning up the mess while she was out. For the past 15 years, she had been doing all of that. I was getting very exhausted because I felt like I was working a lot and then coming home and taking care of the house. One night my wife and the fiancé were in our living room looking through some magazines and putting together some ideas. Her friend was there, somewhat disinterested in everything that was happening, though I could see that he was peeking over at my wife quite frequently. I was used to him looking at her, that was one of the main reasons I suspected he had feelings for her to begin with, but the fact that he was still staring at her longingly while he was engaged was rubbing me the wrong way. A couple of days later, my wife told me that she was going over to their house to help with some preparations. About an hour after she told me she left, the fiancé knocked on my door and told me that she had left a pair of sunglasses in our living room. I told her that I wished she'd have just let us know so my wife could have brought it over to her house that afternoon. She then informed me that my wife was not at her house. We didn't know where she was. I asked her about where her fiancé was and she told me that he was at the office working. It was a Saturday and over the years that I'd known him, he had never been one to go above and beyond and show up for work on Saturday. Right away, I believed that my wife lied to me about planning the wedding to go spend time with him. I explained that to the fiancé and she was enraged when I told her that. She thought the idea that my wife and her fiancé were together was preposterous. I was able to convince her to join me while we went to look for them. Thankfully, with our phone plan, we had a family GPS tracker installed so I was able to find out where she was. The GPS tracker took us to an old strip mall where most of the buildings had been vacated decades before. We saw both of their cars in the parking lot and slowly approached them. When we drove up closer to my wife's van, we saw her and her friend inside having sex. They didn't notice us until I knocked on the window and they both jumped and tried to cover themselves. The fiancé opened the door as soon as she heard the lock click and nearly dragged my wife out by her hair. I hadn't been expecting her to physically assault anyone, so I was able to separate them and get my wife away from her. My wife and her friend tried to explain what happened to us. They said that they just needed to figure out if there was anything there before he got married. I suppose she forgot about how she had been married to me for 15 years. If there had been something with him, did she plan on just leaving me and the children? All I knew was that she wouldn't have to worry about that anymore because I was going to be leaving her. The fiancé yelled at my wife's friend and called him just about every name in the book before throwing her ring in his face. I told my wife that I wanted her to go and stay with her parents while we figured everything out. I met with a lawyer as soon as I could because I knew we were going to have a difficult divorce battle ahead of us. When we got married, we signed a prenuptial agreement to keep all of our assets separate from each other. But when my wife quit her job, that changed a lot of things. Because she cheated, I didn't want to give her anything. But I was worried I was going to have to pay her spousal support. My attorney was amazing and they were able to get me out of doing that. Unfortunately, my wife was able to keep the house. That didn't matter too much to me because I didn't want any reminders of the time she might have spent with her friend in the house. Even though she got the house, she ended up having to sell it for a portion of what was paid for it because she couldn't afford to upkeep it on her own. She ended up having to get a job as well, and I knew she was unhappy about that after spending years out of the field. We now have joint custody of our children and they have a lot of resentment toward their mother for destroying their family. I don't want them growing up hating their mother just because of what she did to me, so I try to swallow my pride as much as I can, but sometimes it's hard. She tried to date her friend after everything was finished, but they both realized there really wasn't anything there. After sleeping with each other, they weren't even able to get back to being friends. They ended up no longer speaking to each other. Right now, I'm just focused on re-establishing a life for myself with my children. I'm not too worried about dating. OP, I'm so sorry to hear that you had to go through all of that. You spent 15 years of your life dedicated to someone else who was very quick to throw it all away. It's such a shame that she showed her true colors to you so late into the relationship. Hearing about how close she was to her friend was somewhat of a red flag. That's not to say that men and women cannot be friends with each other, but in a lot of cases, you should trust your gut when you believe there are feelings there. It definitely sounds like he was having a hard time with relationships because he had feelings for your wife. Instead of shutting you down when you questioned it, your wife should have listened to what you said and done something to assure you they were just platonic. On top of that, it definitely does sound like your wife was jealous of the fiancé. Why else would she have disliked her more than all of the other women? As soon as her friend decided he wanted to be happy focusing on someone else, she decided that she did have feelings for him after all and couldn't let him be happy. I know having a divorce after all this time can be difficult too, but it sounds like you have a good head on your shoulders and you're focused on the important stuff. I hope you and your children can recover from all of this and live a happy life in the future. Now let's get into our second story for today. I, 24 male, and my girlfriend, 24 female, had known each other for years before we both confessed our feelings to each other and started dating. We were in the same friend group in college and ever since I met her I had feelings for her, but I was too nervous to come out and tell her about them. She actually ended up drunk messaging me one day telling me that she thought I was cute and funny and she had a little bit of a crush on me. I made sure to wait until she was sober to respond so I could make sure she was sure about what she was saying. We have been together ever since my sophomore year of college. All of our friends thought we were a great couple. We were even voted as the best couple in our senior yearbook. It felt validating to have other people look at our relationship as something they wanted to work toward in their own lives. After college, we both moved in together and got jobs to start our lives with. I felt like our relationship was thriving for a long time. About 4 years into our relationship, my girlfriend came to me and told me that she thought she might be bisexual. I'm a very progressive person, so I didn't think much about it. I told her that I was there for her to talk to if she needed an ear, and I was there for her when she told her family. Her family wasn't the most understanding at first, but they eventually came around. After a conversation, we discussed what her sexuality looked like in our relationship. I have a lot of friends in the LGBT community, and I've heard a lot about the bisexual erasure that has happened within a lot of media and different communities. I never wanted her to feel like she was missing a part of herself by being in a relationship with a man. She assured me that she didn't feel that way at all. Because she was bisexual, she was happy being in a relationship with me, but with her sexuality, that meant that she was just attracted to women also. A few months passed since we had that conversation and everything was as normal as it ever was with us. Her revelation didn't have much of an impact on our relationship, though I was doing what I could to educate myself to make sure she was feeling seen and heard in the relationship. My girlfriend started to withdraw herself from me, and I was worried that there was something I was doing that was wrong, so I asked her about it. She told me that there was nothing that I was doing, but she was feeling a little off in general. She asked for a little bit of space, and I gave it to her. She stayed with her parents for the weekend and I stayed home and waited for her to come back. She needed space, so I wasn't texting her and calling her or anything like that. I waited for her to respond to me before I did anything. When she came back, she was back to her old self. I was happy to see that that little bit of space was enough to help her overcome what she was going through. I asked her about it the day she came back, and she told me that she was just not feeling like herself and needing some time to recuperate from that. I didn't question it any more than that. A few weeks passed and she was once again withdrawing herself from me. I didn't know it was going on, but if it was something to do with her mental health, I thought that she might need some help or someone to talk to, so I asked her about it again. She seemed surprised by what I was saying, as if she hadn't even realized she was acting a certain way. She just told me not to worry about it. She stayed like that for about a month. My mom came into town and I took her out to lunch while my girlfriend ended up staying behind at the apartment. She asked me about what was going on with my girlfriend and I explained everything to her. My mom was immediately concerned about it, but not for the same reasons I was. When I was young, my father cheated on my mother and she never quite recovered from that. When I explained what happened, my mom immediately associated it with how my father acted while he was having an affair. As soon as she said that, I rejected the idea. There was no way my girlfriend would cheat on me. We had an incredible relationship and I was always there for her when she needed me. There was no chance that she was cheating. My mom told me that she couldn't be sure either, but it was something that I should keep my eyes open for just in case. She even gave me some tips on how to try and catch her if she was. I went home somewhat annoyed by the conversation that I had with my mother, but I couldn't get it out of my head. The more I thought about what she said, the more I realized there might be some merit to it. Even if she wasn't cheating, there very well could have been something that she was hiding from me. I didn't know how to ask my girlfriend about it. If there was something that she was going through, asking her if she was cheating on me may only make things worse. Later that night, we both laid down to go to bed and I couldn't fall asleep. After I heard my girlfriend snoring beside me, I snuck around her side of the bed and grabbed her phone to look through it. I felt guilty while I was pulling it off the charger. Neither of us had ever done anything like that before, but it was almost compulsive. The idea that my partner might be cheating on me had completely taken over my mind and I couldn't think about anything else. I stepped out of the room and looked through her phone, searching for any signs that she might be having an affair. I found those signs in droves. One of the first things that I noticed was that in one of her folders she had the Hinge app downloaded. Of course, I went on there and I looked through the app, where I saw that she had been matched with several women. I looked through some of the messages and one stood out in particular. There was a woman that she matched with whom they had both spoken about how they were in similar situations. They realized that they were attracted to women while they were in relationships with men, and they felt like they needed to explore that attraction. They both admitted to being in committed monogamous relationships while also setting up a time to hook up. The first time that they hooked up together was when my girlfriend went to spend time at her parents' house, when she told me she needed time apart. I was upset to learn that she had lied to me about what she was going through and where she was going so she could sleep with another person. According to the messages, they both enjoyed their time together and planned to continue their relationship. I found countless messages where they had been flirting and exchanging sexual messages with each other. I screenshotted all of the information that I found and sent the information to myself before deleting it. I knew right away that I was going to be ending things with my girlfriend. It didn't matter to me that she was exploring her new identity. We were in a committed relationship and she cheated on me with someone else. The next day she told me that she was going to go to her parents' house again. She said that she agreed with me and thought that she wasn't acting like herself, so she thought it would be good to have some time alone again. I just nodded my head and said that sounded like a good idea. When she left, I followed her. She went to a motel and shortly after the other girl joined her there. I was able to get a couple of pictures of them kissing in the doorway, but everything else happened behind closed doors. I assumed that if she was taking the entire weekend to go back home with her parents, she would be spending the weekend with that girl. so I reached out to her boyfriend. I told him about what happened and what I saw, and shortly after he called me. He didn't want to believe what I had to say, but I assured him that what I saw was true and that they were having an affair. We agreed to meet up at the hotel the following day. We were going to surprise them at the hotel and end everything with them. When he arrived, I knocked on the door and heard a lot of shuffling on the other end. My girlfriend opened it with a smile, but when she saw who was behind the door, it quickly faded away. The other girl was in the room, lounging on the bed. Her jaw dropped when she saw her boyfriend standing at the door. They tried to explain what they were doing there, but I stopped them and told them that we knew everything that was happening. I broke up with my girlfriend right away and told her that I wanted her out of the apartment. The other man told his girlfriend that he wanted her to move out of his house and that he wanted nothing to do with her. I felt even worse when he asked for a ring back from her. I had no idea they were engaged. I walked away to go to my car and my girlfriend chased behind me trying to apologize for what happened. I told her I didn't want to hear anything that she had to say, but she tried to tell me that it wasn't cheating because it was with a woman. It didn't make any sense why that would be the excuse she gave. She was having sex with another person. I didn't care that it was a woman. I didn't think it was hot that she was sneaking around behind my back. She was my girlfriend and I loved her, and she betrayed me. Honestly, I was offended that she would think I would be okay with it because it was a woman. She didn't know me at all, and that was clear. I just drove away and told her one last time that I wanted her out of the apartment. She ended up having to move back home with her parents, who were very surprised that she had cheated on me to begin with, and even more so that it was with a woman. I felt bad that she was going to have to live with people who weren't necessarily the most accepting of who she was, but at the same time I didn't want to think too much about her. I just can't understand why she wouldn't talk to me about what she was feeling. Throughout the entirety of our relationship, I had gone out of my way to make her feel understood and heard, and she still took advantage of our relationship and betrayed my trust. OP, I'm so sorry you had to go through something like this. It does sound like you did everything you could to make your girlfriend feel comforted and safe, and she threw it all away. You did the best that you could to comfort her when you thought she was going through something, and she took advantage of that to lie about where she was going so she could have an affair. I know there are a lot of people who fetishize women in relationships with other women, but regardless of that, she still cheated on you. Cheating is cheating, and it doesn't matter who it was with. You took someone's trust in you and broke it. This is an interesting case because I can understand how she might have felt like she was missing something by not exploring her identity more, but that's something that could have been discussed with you. Maybe even in this situation it would have been better for her to break up with you and take some time to herself to explore before settling down, but it seems like she wanted the best of both worlds. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. My wife, 48, and I, 49, have been together for nearly 20 years, married for 19 of them. We have a total of 4 kids, 2 girls ages 18, 16, and 2 boys 15 and 12. This year will be our 20th anniversary, though it's safe to say that I am not in the mood for celebrating that event. I'll never be celebrating it at all. The cheating never should have come as a surprise, because my wife had been threatening to leave for a few years now. I'd take it in stride, let her say what she wanted, and then things would go back to normal for a while. This started way after our kids were born, so for the sake of the kids, I just put up with it. My wife has always enjoyed spending time with her friends. At least once a week, she would go out drinking with them and come home late. I always enjoyed spending time with my kids and being at home with them anyway, so it didn't matter to me. Once upon a time, my wife used to like it, back when the kids were smaller, but at some point that changed. Again, it didn't matter to me because I loved being at home with them. It was this year that my wife started going out multiple times a week rather than just once. I didn't think much of it at first. All I thought was that since the kids were getting a lot older now, she just had even less interest in staying home with them. There were 4 of them, but I tried my best to be enough for them. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. One day I was contacted by a family member of my wife who confessed to me that my wife had been cheating on me for more than a year with a guy named Greg. They met at one of the clubs my wife frequented with her friends, though they have told me since that they had no idea it was happening. My wife was doing a great job of being secretive that not even her closest friends were able to figure it out. She hadn't confessed to this family member. Rather, they had spotted them kissing in a McDonald's parking lot. Classy, I know. We might have not been very close, but she felt like it was important to confess the truth to me. When she got home from going out with her friends that night, I confronted her with what her family member said. At first, there was the typical denial from her. Then when it became clear that I wasn't going to buy it, because this family member had no reason to lie to me, her demeanor changed to one of anger. "What did you expect?" she shouted. "You never interested me, and only paid attention to the kids." I admit that after a while of my wife being constantly hot and cold, I gave up and stopped trying. But what else would you expect? One could only be burned for so long before they stopped wanting to get hurt by the fire. For a few days after that, we didn't speak until I finally decided that I couldn't go through the motions anymore. Even for the sake of my kids, it wasn't very healthy for them anyway, something I realized now with therapy. So I told her I was officially filing for divorce. At first, she seemed thrilled that she was going to be free of everything. She could be free to continue with her relationship with this guy Greg, who I knew nothing about and didn't want to learn about either. It's what she probably wanted for years now. Why she didn't just bring it up to me, rather than string me along, was beyond me. Friends and family seemed shocked by the news. I didn't say much about the situation, telling them nothing more than she stepped out of the marriage and I was seeking a divorce. Any questions they had they could send my wife's way. Let her deal with them. It's been a couple of months since DDA, and I'm not going to lie, it was difficult to get to a point where I was no longer struggling every day. Slowly, I started to climb out of my shell. I've lost 30 pounds and gotten back into working out. My kids also seem happier. That was probably the best thing to see. I should have realized how the tense environment between me and their mother was making them feel. All 4 of them didn't say as much, but it seemed like a weight off their shoulders. They had chosen to live and spend much of their time with me. My wife was fine with this in the beginning. Then the consequences of her actions started to make her newfound freedom seem not so free. We lived in a city, but our neighborhood was quite close-knit. My wife was always the more outgoing and friendly one, so she interacted with them more. However, after news of her cheating reached the block, they started to shun her. I honestly was surprised to see them cut her off and rally around me. She was always more of an active neighbor. Yet, despite that, they were quick to give me whatever support they could give. Something interesting happened last week. My wife had come by to see the kids, which I allowed because I still wanted them to have a relationship with their mother. I walked the kids downstairs and saw my wife waiting outside the building. One of our neighbors walked by, one that my wife had been very close with. She said hello and the neighbor completely ignored her. The icing on the cake was that when she saw me and the kids, she said hello. My wife was red in the face from anger and embarrassment. She practically stormed away from the apartment with the kids trailing behind her, looking confused and a little embarrassed. I almost burst out laughing, even if it would have been pretty immature to do it, not that I'd be blamed. Look at what my wife had done. I made sure to text them and check in to see if everything was going all right because I was a little concerned with my wife's attitude. However, my eldest daughter assured me that everything was going all right. My wife wasn't taking anything out on them, so I could relax and be assured that they were going to have a good time. I've gotten the feeling that any time she comes around to pick up the kids, this is going to happen. I don't feel anything towards her and certainly not 1 ounce of pity. My wife and hopefully ex-wife soon once everything is signed, is the one who did all of this to herself, so she is the only one she can blame. In the meantime, I'm just going to keep focusing on me and the kids. I don't know if romance will ever be in the cards for me again, but that's a bridge I'll cross if I ever come to it. For now, the kids are my number one priority, something my wife never quite managed to learn in all the years we were married. OP, first let me say that good on that family member for stepping forward and telling you what was going on. Sometimes family will stand by family even when they are in the wrong. It's nice to see this wasn't the case. Your wife truly beat you down until you had no confidence left. That is extremely hard to bounce back from, so it's good to see you are slowly taking the steps to get there. Trust me when I say your kids are going to appreciate that you are putting their father's mental health and well-being first for once. I'm glad that the neighborhood is sticking by you after news of the affair came out. Sometimes karma never comes for cheaters, or it comes too late. In this instance, it's nice to see that your wife just isn't going to be able to walk in and continue these friendships. She lost the chance to be their friend when she stepped out of your relationship. Just make sure to keep an air of civility for your children. Your wife still is their mother. It doesn't mean you have to like her, but you do need to at least remain civil. Surprisingly, it seems like your wife is going through this despite her transgressions, so I hope it continues. Now, for our next story. My now ex-wife, 35, and I, 35 male, were together for 9 years, with one of them being spent as a married couple. The two of us didn't have kids, but we had 2 dogs that we loved to pieces. One of them was disabled, so they required a little bit more care than the other, but that didn't matter to me. We had our fights and issues over the years, but it was nothing it didn't seem like we could work on. I foolishly believed that our issues were something that could be fixed. I went as far as to suggest counseling, to which my ex-wife agreed. However, to successfully do couples counseling, both people have to be willing to work with the therapist. I was more than willing to work with the therapist and was upfront about my issues. Most of the time she would just let me talk. A few times my ex-wife didn't even show up, so I was left there, sitting awkwardly with the therapist who felt bad for me. Despite this, I wasn't willing to give up. Then I discovered she was cheating on me, and it was like a huge wake-up call. It was a complete accident that I discovered it. She said she was going to hang out with a friend for the day, so I spent the day doing some chores. This included going to the grocery store to grab some things for dinner. When I was there, I ended up bumping into the actual friend she was supposed to be out with. I asked the friend where my wife was. Her friend seemed confused, so right then I knew something was up. Why would she lie about hanging out with a friend that she wasn't hanging out with? It was hard to do the grocery shopping when my mind was focused on where my wife was, but I managed to do it. When I got home, I waited for my wife to come home. She came in the door, greeting me like nothing was wrong. I confronted her right away because I couldn't wait to talk about this situation. When I told her I ran into her friend, her face paled. She said she made a mistake, but I didn't buy it. I pushed and pushed. Eventually, my ex-wife told me that she was sexting with this guy she met online. This had been going on for nearly the entire time we were married, which devastated me. That night was the first time they met. How romantic, I sneered. Normally, it wasn't like me to be sarcastic, but I was hurt and just so angry. Here I was trying to work on this relationship with my wife. I was even willing to go to counseling. Meanwhile, she is messing around with this guy. I looked back at all the times she was on the phone and laptop. It didn't seem odd to me before, but now I realized how intense it was. Her first reaction was to beg me to give us another try. We were best friends, she said. She couldn't live without me. When I pointed out that the two of us were already seeing a therapist, my wife said she was going to try this time. In an act of desperation, I gave her a second chance. Then 3 days later, I caught her talking with the guy. She said they were just friends, and it was difficult to cut off a friendship. My wife claimed they had to taper off slowly. It was at that point I knew my marriage and entire relationship was over. I told her that under no circumstances would I give her another chance. The moment I said that, it was like a flip switch. My wife told me fine and moved out. She ended up staying with her parents. We rented a house, so at least we didn't have to deal with that. I was grateful she was just quick to move out and not put on a fight. Our dogs were confused at first and desperately missed her. I did my best to help them transition to the new environment. Pets can be like people in certain ways. They get separation anxiety and react to sudden changes as much as we do. Once she was out, I kept trying to get her to take the rest of her stuff out of the house. I didn't want to look at it anymore. After weeks of badgering her, I got sick of waiting, put the boxes in the back of my car, and went to her parents' house. I had no animosity towards her parents. They always treated me nice, so while they were surprised to see me, they seemed happy. Her mom said she was sorry for the divorce and said sometimes people just fall out of love. This confused me, so I asked my former mother-in-law what my ex-wife had said was the reason for the divorce. My ex left out the cheating bit, so I felt it was my duty to tell her parents the unabashed truth. They seemed shocked, so I offered to give them evidence if they didn't believe me. No part of me felt bad for telling them the truth. My ex should have been upfront with them. They were good people but figured they would support their daughter despite this because it was their daughter. Oh, how wrong I was. I ended up discovering through mutual friends that my former in-laws confronted my ex about what I said. She denied it, but when they said I offered to show them proof, she admitted that she did step outside the marriage. Her parents then told my ex that she had 30 days to find a new place. At the end of those 30 days, she would have to get out regardless if she found other accommodation. My former mother-in-law did reach out to me to apologize, saying they didn't raise their daughter to have terrible morals like that. I accepted the apology even though it wasn't their fault. How were they to know what their daughter would do as an adult? I got quite a few angry and explicit texts from my ex after her parents kicked her out. She told me that she could be homeless and shamelessly demanded that I let her stay in her old apartment, at least until she got on her feet. My response was to tell my ex to go stay with her AP. If he cared about her so much, then surely he'd let her stay. I blocked any possible numbers she could contact me from and started the next phase of my life. Trying to heal from this relationship was by far the most difficult thing I had ever tried to do. I had my family and friends beside me, but they could only do so much, because unless you've been through this situation, it was hard to relate. However, spending time with those who care about me, going to therapy for just myself, and just taking one day out of the week to take a walk or something proven to help. I still am in the middle of the healing process, but I know I've come a hell of a long way since first discovering her affair. As far as I know, my ex still isn't talking to her parents and is couch surfing until she can officially move into her new apartment. There are times she still tries to reach out to contact me, but outside of official channels regarding our divorce, we have no reason to talk. Let the AP have my ex. He may think he has won the ultimate prize, but this couldn't be further from the truth. My ex is about as far from a prize as you can get. OPD, it's great that you are able to see the bright light at the end of your tunnel. You're seeing it because you are the one who took the time and effort to get yourself there. Even though you did give her a brief second chance, you quickly changed her mind when it became clear your ex had no intention of working on your marriage. Surviving such turmoil is not easy, but take steps to help you heal along the way with therapy, spending time with loved ones, etc. There will be times you may wonder if it's all worth it, but trust me, it is. You just need to keep at it and constantly be looking as well as moving forward. I also just want to say that your ex is truly a piece of work. It's great that her family was able to see her for who she truly is. It can be a toss-up when dealing with family and friends. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.